custom GPT instructions. Has anyone heard of this? Has anyone got a chance to play with this at all? Bob, you want to share what it is? Bob Matchin?
Yeah, so I'm no expert on it. I looked at it and decided not to pursue it. So the gist of it is that in prompting, a lot of folks like to give as input to the system who they are and background on themselves. So you might say, I am a special ed teacher. We had a couple of teachers that gave introduction there. I've got 25 years experience. I'm very knowledgeable in such and such a space. Please do the following for me, X. So that's the good news. You don't have to repeat it over and over again. And a lot of us, what we've used is external notes in order to do so. However, the reason I decided not to pursue it is that it uses that custom prompt. And I know Rosemary has a little experience here, so she's probably better to tell real experience, but it'll continue to use that. And often what I find is I don't want to use that more than once. So maybe it's just my confusion around it, whether you can just selectively use it versus not use it. But I don't want it to use it because I want it to play different roles depending on the question or the topic I want to pursue.
So Rosemary, I don't know why we have like 35 Greg Olsons here. So, but Rosemary, what's your experience? And I'll pull it up so everyone can see it.
Okay, so we're talking about custom instructions, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I did, Paul, could I just share for a second?
Sure. Even better, even better.
Okay, so.
And start from the beginning. Start and just kind of show where the people it is who haven't turned it on, and then walk up to is there value? Okay,
sure. So there is, and this just came out, I don't know, Bob, what did it come out like 2 days ago? So this is a way that you can give information that is always, it's sort of your default instructions to ChatGPT, and it's called custom instructions. So for example, I'm giving you what I put, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but you're going to turn this on in settings, and I can show you where that is over here. I have way too many windows open. I'm going to come back to that just because I have this on the screen. And so what I'm showing you is I did some different testing, turning custom instructions on and off, and I used it with GPT-4 and I used it with 3.5. And I'm not sure if you've seen all the new commentary about how ChatGPT 3.5 is actually getting better and ChatGPT 4 is not doing so well. There's a great paper that just came out about that. But just with respect to custom instructions, looking at ChatGPT 4 only, I asked it, I said, I want to create a new module for my ChatGPT training courses that cover sales. What would those topics be? So when I had custom instructions on, it went through a whole list of what those topics should be, and it gave me the pros and cons and why I should include that. On the right-hand side, I don't get any of that. I get sort of what I would call bland suggestions for my training module. But when I go down to 3.5, I think it did a pretty good job of pulling out some important things that I might want to have here. And it actually had some good data points on things that weren't covered in GPT-4. So I actually like it if you're not doing a variety of vastly different types of projects where you would want to change that. But it's so easy to turn it on and off that I'll show you that.
Rosemary, that's fantastic. You jumped right in and did some comparison.
Isn't that what we all do on Sundays? Okay, so you go, this is a pro feature. I have heard that it's supposed to be available to others. You might not see it in your ChatGPT account just yet. It is new, it's being rolled out, but this is what it looks like. You get 2 different sections that have up to 1,500 character counts for each. So there's some prompts here to help you know what you should put in each of these sections. So I said that I teach marketing departments how to use AI tools. I want to be seen as an AI tools expert for marketers. So that's what I gave as who I am. And then I had a pretty long description about how I would like my responses to be. I want them to be intelligent, clear formats, simplified for easy reading. Lengthy responses are good. And I also told that it can have opinions because I'd like to see what those would be. And so far I haven't done any testing to see what happens when you pull that one sentence out of the equation. So then I asked it to, when I'm discussing work-related items, give the feedback to me in bullet point format with bolding, or in a table format organized by themes and topics. Outline pros and cons so I can easily compare. And when it modifies my existing content that I've put in there, then I want it to tell me why it changed something. So that's really it in a nutshell.
Rosemary, you might just showing people on the settings how to turn it on if they haven't.
Yes. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Correct. We're going to go back to settings. You're going to go to beta features. And you're going to just toggle this over here to custom instructions. Okay, so ideally you want all three of those on. Any questions?
Rosemary, is your understanding is basically what you put in custom instructions, just basically showing up in every prompt that you do going forward? Is that it's like a mini lang chain? Is that the right way to think through it?
Well, I think of it as this is the default setting, and I want ChatGPT to know that about any prompt I enter. But it's super simple to turn it off. And you just go in here, and then you can just turn it off here by disable. And the chat information doesn't go away.
That's great.
Okay. So that's that. Back to you, Paul.
There are questions on that? So maybe we should wait a week next time. I think we jumped the gun on that. Like, give people more. Thank you, Rose. That was fabulous.
So Paul, just for everyone's view, Rosemary, the instruction she gives, she wants to provide a consistent view of who she is and what she's looking for. So it's essentially automated all of that manual labor, and you don't have to go copy and paste from a separate post. So those of us who've been using this for quite a while might have our favorite prompts or favorite queuing up of prompts. I looked at that. For me, my role is different of what I want to provide. So virtually every prompt, or at least every conversation I should have, is customized for the approach I want to provide it, as well as the output I want. So to turn it on and off only provides value to that single set of instructions you give, as opposed to perhaps a half a dozen or a dozen different approaches I use to my conversation. So it's a trade-off, is what I would say.
But another thing, though, is you can put tone, right? So I think that's also nice. You can give it other things that Bob might not be different across your different projects, right?
I would actually no, but that's okay. If it works for you and others, right? Kind of thing. Like I think the teacher examples that we were talking about earlier are probably pretty consistent. In terms of my own usage, at least that I have seen thus far, they vary significantly, such that I prefer to have the separate prompt notes, I guess is the way I would describe it.
That's great. Any other questions on custom instructions?
So there's a nice little trick actually, Paul, that people are using, which is you create a custom instruction for the entire company. And that way you get a nice, consistent persona for all the employees of your company. So you create a custom instruction, give it to all your employees, and now you can consistently have them use ChatGPT using that persona.
And each employee has to put it in. There's not an enterprise way to do global. That's.
That is correct. Yeah,
okay.
that is correct. So, yeah, so this has been pretty effective actually, because you can get all your employees to, follow your tone, follow your, you know, like whatever your brand is, a lot of stuff like that.
I could certainly see larger companies, Rosemary, hit 6 or 8 people creating content in different areas. Out of,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my use case actually. I have 8 people creating content, and I just got tired of them being off message. So now with this customer instruction, you get the persona.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Olden. Any other questions on custom instructions? Great. So let's open up the open mic. We usually open mic as people can raise their hand, share a case study, something interesting they found. The last probably like 2 months, we've had so many good kind of showcase demos that this has really been squeezed out of it. But I'd like to open it up for contributions, ideas. Go ahead, Bob.
As long as nobody else has their hand raised, since I've hogged the mic. I've spent a couple of weeks on Code Interpreter, diving really deep. It's more of a,
it's gonna explain what Code Interpreter is for maybe the part of the audience that don't understand what it is.
yeah. So let me give a high level view, and then I'll add some technical details to it, and Alden can help out here as well, based his own understanding. So sort of as Rosemary showed, for Plus subscribers, there's a set of beta features. One of them is plugins, and we've had a lot of discussions there, but I believe it's up to, as Rosemary said, about 800 plugins, which are separate modules that talk directly to OpenAI's API and do lots of different things. Some really useful stuff, for example, reading PDFs, OCR conversion, lots of different topics. I would suggest people go explore that. Those are Plus users. One of the new features that was rolled out to researchers back about 2-3 months ago is this feature called Code Interpreter. And I would suggest for those interested in what it's possible to follow a gentleman named Ethan Mollick, Mollick, on LinkedIn. He showed some pretty amazing usages of it. So as the name doesn't imply, it actually does a lot more than just interpret code. So for example, you could give it a data set. You could grab stock ticker information from the internet and have it show it in 3D, for example, rotating models. It's kind of pretty cool. It can do plotting of data. So you give it a spreadsheet or a CSV file, and it'll plot data. It can graph data. But let me peel under the covers a little bit so you can get a little bit more insight into its power. And as Rosemary and I have had some discussions offline, is comparing it to Microsoft Excel. So what it is it's ChatGPT 4 front-ending Python, and more specifically with access to Python's libraries, hundreds, if not thousands of libraries. The most fascinating ones are when it grabs its mathematics libraries. Pandas is one of them, NumPy is another, Plotlib is a third. So basically what it's doing is it's taking your requests. I mean, I'll give you a very simple one. Calculate the number of days between date 1 and date 2. And ironically, I did that for when I started using ChatGPT, and it was exactly 150 on Friday. So it was interesting to find that out. So it's translating the text to vectors, and then it's going to Python to execute the commands. So depending on what the request is what Python library it'll draw up. In this case, I happen to mention 3 of them. So that analysis, it will put into output. So you describe what output you want. For example, you could have it output into a CSV file, an Excel file, or a JPEG. For example, if you do a plot or a graph or a bar chart, for example. And I'll give you, I could show it, Paul, but I don't want to take too much time here. But I had 10 years of home value, more specifically land separated from the building structure, separated and then totaled it. And I wanted to see how it compared to, for example, to the compound CPI index. So, but I was missing 2 years. So I put it into a Excel file, rows and columns, and I asked it to do a CAGR function, compounded annual growth rate, and it filled in those two things. Then I asked it to plot it on a chart and a graph so I could see what it looked like. There are some nuances around it, and this is kind of what I want to bring up, and then I'd like Alden to add any perspective, because I'm sure he's quite familiar with it, is that when it takes your requests, it doesn't know some specifics. So similar to when we were learning GPT 3.5 or 4.0, it didn't know, for example, to make the x-axis and y-axis equal to 0. So I was getting this skewed, view of it, and it reminded me of 40 years ago when people used to falsely represent data in the Wall Street Journal way back when, before we were using computers. And you actually have to tell it if you specifically want to do such things. But the gist is actually fairly simple. It's taking a text input, and instead of just giving you text output, it can translate those into Python library requests. And it's the full range of what Python can do. In this particular case, most of its usage is around data analysis or data modeling and so forth. One thing I will say is that it's a misnomer or misdirection to think it handles complex spreadsheets. So if the concept of complex spreadsheets is large amounts of data, rows and columns, that is a correct statement, but it can't handle spreadsheets that have lots of different portions to it. Those of us that are been around spreadsheets for lots of years and know what's really going on. If you're an Excel wizard, as Rosemary is, she said, can't you do this with pivot tables, for example? I had spent a dozen commands cleaning up a massive volunteer spreadsheet for my bicycle racing club. And she said, well, can't you do it in Excel? Well, sure enough, a couple of days later, the race director posted the result and had pivot tables on the top that basically showed me all I did was work expansion. Anyway, those are some highlights. I'd love Alden to add some comments, because I know he's technically quite familiar with it as well, if not more.
You did a great job, Bob. Nothing to add. Loved it.
Great. Go ahead, Toby Jones.
Just following on from that, actually, the last few days, I started playing with Code Interpreter as well. Initially, I didn't, because maybe similar to what Bob maybe alluded to at the beginning, was I read the brief, and as soon as I saw the word Python, I thought this function's probably not for me. I don't really mess around with code too much. But an example was given to me about how it can ingest CSV files. So in Australia, our financial year runs slightly differently. So we've just finished ours at the end of June. So I actually pulled last year's CSV file from HubSpot, our CRM that we use, and uploaded that in, and then talked to it like it was our sales manager, and actually got it to interrogate the data, which would have taken me a whole heap of time, and actually started asking it questions around like decisions that we have already made in the last few weeks around what we're doing for the 23-24 year, but to see if it had different ideas from it. And they're actually very similar. And actually some of the things that they were coming up with, which I know a sales manager would have spent weeks going through and finding out where the gaps are, where certain salespeople are missing data, where certain deals have dragged, looking at averages, all of that was done instantly. I even got slightly cheeky with it, and we unfortunately had to rank a few people and make a few people repurposing them in other parts of the business, and actually asked, who would you repurpose? And it actually had brought up the same people that we actually repurposed based on the data that it saw on there. So the main thing I found with it was making sure, and it'd be great to try this with the what was shared earlier with the custom. Sorry, what was it called again? Custom
Instructions.
custom instructions, because I did find I had to ensure that I gave the parameters of these are the things that are priority for us. This is what our board are saying. These are the priorities for the next financial year. And then based on that, it was able to give some really great insights. So yeah, literally, if you are using marketing data, sales data, being able to download a CSV file that's got any kind of metrics in it and loading it in and just being able to ask some common questions, I found it super interesting.
Oh, but that's fantastic. Thanks for sharing. Share with the group one or two of the queries you did. Is it who was the best sales rep last quarter? Or
Yeah, so I looked at
and then we'll go back-
positive highlights. And then it gave me some that were kind of a bit what I thought were a little bit kind of not that interesting. So I sort of said our board is interested on, you know, high growth, commercial outcomes. Then it gave me different highlights. I then said where are there areas of concern. I then asked, could you give feedback to each of our salespeople? What were the 3 things that you'd get them to look at in the first quarter to improve their performance? And it did things like identifying deals that don't have full contact information or deals that have lagged over a certain period of time. And so, yeah, things like that were really super helpful. And then even highlighting things like which salesperson is currently the best performer, what can other salespeople learn from that person? And so it will give those sorts of metrics against it.
Thanks, Toby. And what I find just fascinating there is, you know, which reps sold the most. That's pretty straightforward. The ones with more quantitative, what can you learn from the top 3? That's a whole nother cognitive level here that it's starting to provide. It's just stunning. Thank you, Toby. Let's jump to Alan. Alan, go ahead.
There we go. Thanks. Good to see everyone as always. I wanted to focus on something different, and I know all of that stuff's been exciting. I've been playing a lot recently with Google's Bard, and one of the new features that they recently introduced is the ability to include images along with your prompting and querying. And it's been interesting experimenting with it. So we would be doing things like uploading an image and say, write a story to go with this image. And it would do that pretty accurately. And we would upload a couple of images and say, what changed between picture 1 and picture 2? And it didn't do a very good job on that one. But it's been interesting playing with different things that we can do with images and what that brings. Saw some experiments recently, for example, with someone who sketched out what they wanted a web page to look like on the back of a napkin, uploaded that image and said, design this web page. And it designed the web page. So it gave the HTML that turned into a web page and was active. It had a button. When you clicked on the button, it did something. So it was pretty impressive what it's doing with this.
And I've seen 2 other examples. I haven't tried it myself. One is someone took a picture of a website and uploaded that. It already existed and says, show me the HTML JavaScript for that.
That's a good twist. I like that.
And the other one was, I've seen 2 examples of people taking their handwritten notes and uploading that and converts it to text. That's great. That's great. And Alan, I'm curious, what are you learning about the images? What's your sense that it's taking the image and kind of converting it to
That's
doing that? Or what do you think's really going on under the covers there?
That's part of what is kind of mystifying that we're trying to figure out still. The evidence so far doesn't seem like it's doing that. Because I mean, one approach could certainly be there's an intermediate step that we're not visible to, where it's saying there's like a hidden prompt that says, caption this photo or describe this photo. And it doesn't seem to be doing that. It does look like it is treating an image the same way that it treats text, as in it's creating a symbolic representation of the image, not a textual description of the image, and then doing something. I'm hand waving a lot here because I don't know. I don't understand exactly what it's doing, but it doesn't look like it's converting it to text first. It looks like it's treating it as an image.
So that's great. So for everyone else, I mean, in general, we've talked about generative AI, meaning you put something in, you get something out. So with text to text has been the ChatGPT. In the past, we talked about text to image. We talked about text to video. And this is switching around where we get image coming in and text going out. And Alan, that's kind of interesting because, so much discussion on video going in, so what does that start looking like when you've got all the YouTube stuff going in and either coming out as training data or.
Well, I mean, so far with a lot of the YouTube stuff that we've seen, really what it's doing is it's taking the transcript that's attached to the YouTube video and doing something with the transcript. So it's kind of, again, it's treating it like text. This really seems to be like it is not treating it as text. It's treating it as image and accompanying text and doing something with the two of them together. And that's kind of interesting to see where that goes.
Yeah, Alan, this is John Spielkla. You might want to look at the work of Jim Glass over at MIT. And I just wrote I just started on Substack, and I just wrote a thing about how maybe all LLMs will become LMMs, that is large media models, because the semantics across, I think it's possible that you will have, if the semantics are an n-dimensional semantic model, right? And then you're going to have isomorphic transformations from situational semantics that are sometimes visual, sometimes auditory, you know what I mean? And so I think Jim is trying to work directly with that. So as you say, it doesn't go through text into the semantic model. It's just the correlation and the semantics of each of the images, each of the vectors of semantics, images, sound, and so forth, right? That get munched together into that. Anyway, so yeah, I posted it, and it refers to his talk at the MIT event that Paul helped arrange.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. The other, I guess, related thing, and I don't know how much of this is the same technology, is that they've now opened up to developers the ability to create these embedding vectors from images with embeddings that share the same space as some text. So you'll be able to, so developers will be able to develop apps that can do things like, you've saved a bunch of photos, now do a search for them using a text search. And you don't have to have pre-labeled the images. You don't have to have pre-processed the images. All you need to have done is gotten the embeddings for the image and then do a straightforward vector nearby search for them, which is something that we know how to do. We've talked about a number of times here. So yes, Aidan, embeddings for images, very cool. Currently in public preview on Google's cloud. It's some really interesting stuff that I've been playing with.
That's great. Thanks. Thank you, Alan. Thanks, John. All right, Carrie, go ahead. Carrie Fu.
Thank you, Paul. And Alan, I just want to pitch for your YouTube channel on Dialogue Flow CX Basics. So just kind of what Ellen was talking about, and also what John was talking about, instead of LLM, it could be, large media, databases. You're welcome, Ellen. Thank you for always explaining so well. So as a teacher, I'm actually going to start planning, hopefully use ChatGPT. And I love what Rosemary shared as well. What would you guys recommend for teachers? Because we're really struggling with ChatGPT, right? We have options of AI checkers, but it's more like a policing. We really don't want to police students. We want them to use, and I just recently learned about prompt engineer and how much they make. So how do we use ChatGPT in a creative way where we're actually helping the students think critically instead of just this copy and paste mentality? And I just throw it to the panel. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Carrie. Carrie, what level are you teaching?
Last year, I was teaching juniors, so 11th graders.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Folks have thoughts on Carrie's question?
I do. This is Ray Hunter.
Go ahead, Ray.
Hi. Yeah, I know some folks. I had some conversations with some teachers the other day. And the group that you're working with, you said with junior high or no, juniors in high school. So they're 16, 17. I think the challenge is going to be that, high schoolers, they already know the technology, right? So they're going to be ahead of most of those who are teaching. So I think the approach, you're right in saying, like, you don't want to police, that was the big thing. I mean, these kids last school year were using it to write essays and take tests and whatnot. And, that's how teachers discovered it, right? And so there was this clamor for a way to determine what's AI, what's not, and that's across all of the domains now, with watermarks and what have you, and having content signed as being, done with AI, not done with AI. But I think, I love to teach myself. I'm not a teacher, but I would say to, be upfront with it right away, right from the beginning of the school year, and say, hey, this, and act inquisitively, to draw out from the students what they do know. So that, when you're dealing with lessons, you could, ask them. It's just the same thing with calculators, right? When we had calculators in high school and the teachers were like, you can't use a calculator, and then it became pretty clear that, if you didn't use a calculator, you were going to fall behind. So, I would say, introduce it early and make it fun. Make it fun, and you'll end up being the cool teacher. Yeah, she knows all about, and then have them teach you, draw it out of them. That would be my approach, my small opinion there.
Thanks,
And
Ray.
Karen- yeah,
Other
Karen,
thoughts?
yeah, sorry. There's a fantastic TED Talk from Khan Academy. I put it in the chat that you might want to watch, because they just show how this is going to be used in the schools by kids and by teachers, and it's fantastic.
Thank you, Rosemary.
So this is Tim Andrews. I will put my cards on the table and say I study with Alan Kay and Seymour Papert and Marvin Minsky, who are all pretty much believe the current educational system is a disaster. But I think they all worked within it. And I think one way to think about this is, if you want to teach critical thinking, well, you have to have the kids be critical. So Seymour always used to say, kids always love to look behind the museum exhibits rather than just at the museum exhibits. So have them look under the hood. What makes this thing work? How do you make a Llama AI? How do you make a ChatGPT? What is a vector embedding? The other thing is break it. Can you break it and show how you broke it? Because you can't fake that. And you're teaching things that way. And the third thing I would say is, Minsky used to always say, you don't understand something until you've seen it from 3 different perspectives that aren't all in agreement. And so another way, instead of saying write an essay, write me 3 essays. And they can't agree. They have to be from different perspectives. So there's a few ways you can try and get the kids to view this as more engaging than just an easier way to write the essay I was assigned to do.
That's fabulous, Tim. Thank you. All right. I think, Toby, you had your hand up?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, in Australia, in high schools, 50% of states took the decision to ban ChatGPT. So that was their first knee-jerk reaction, which was ridiculous, really, because you can ban it in what capacity? Like, students go home, students take out their mobile, like you can't actually keep people from it, or they'll jump onto something else. No one caught up with the fact that then Bard appeared. So then students just started using Bard instead, and they thought ChatGPT and Bard were kind of the same thing. So they just thought, oh, we've solved it. And it just didn't work at all. So there's a lot of conversation. So just to show my cards, we actually work in the ed tech space in Australia. So we're very close to the ground with what people are sort of saying and what teachers are doing. And I think one of the best sort of things that we've sort of started to see happen is in the same way as when you do a mathematics assessment where you've used a scientific calculator. One of the main parts of the question is you have to show your working or show your thinking. And that's the same thing that they're trying to introduce with this, we've seen worked well, which is you're being set a problem to go and find out, research, write something. We all know you're going to use ChatGPT to do that, or some form of AI to do it. But as part of the assessment, it has an extra step to it, which is you now need to present back what you've done and how you got to that conclusion. So what was the steps that you took to do that research? Right. How have you interrogated that to ensure that actually the piece of history it's presented is actually correct? And I think some of the things that I think it was Tim just said before about this idea of interrogating from 3 different angles, I think is a really great way of doing that as well.
That's great. Thanks.
Yeah, I think so too. This is John. There is a tool out there called PowerNotes. It's a plugin for a browser that you basically can show your work. Think of it as Evernote plus AI together. The other thing is I think it's really important to realize just how I used to be an educator, how fundamental this change is. Like if you think of the industrialization of education, it was about pre-industrial education was a conversation and a dialogue. Industrial education was broadcast and a test. We're going to go back the other way because broadcast and a test is gone, completely gone. And so we're going to have to figure out technology leveraged ways to have a broader dialogue and conversation, and watching the work, breaking the stuff, taking people behind the screen. I think we're all part of that. But for me, I think it's a fundamental redo of education, and tools like PowerNotes can help.
That's great. Thanks, John. Who else got the Bob? You have your hand up? Go ahead, Bob. Bob, we can't hear you. You're on mute.
No, I'm sorry, Paul. I didn't have my hand up. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I think Bob Matchin?
Yeah, Macklin, yep.
Macklin, thank you.
So Carrie, here's my 10,000-foot view. What GPT-4 did was commoditized knowledge. So if you think about it, it's the same problem in the data world where they say 97% of all data is sitting there idle. So the question is, okay, how do you use it? So if you think about the student, it's not the answer you're looking for, it's the question. So you give them a topic, for example, and the question is how do they explore? Let me give you an example I used on myself. Back at 11th grade, I had to write a paper on comparing Robert E. Lee and Abraham Lincoln as writers. So it took me about 4 months going to the library to actually find enough research on Robert E. Lee because Lincoln had written a lot. So ChatGPT did that in 10 seconds, right? So then the question is okay, so what? It's done a comparison. What does the student want to know as a result of this? So that's really where the evaluation comes in. Okay, so you have all this raw information, whether it's the Encyclopedia Britannica that if people on this chat even remember what those were, or all these bodies of knowledge. It's what's the questions they're asking to explore. That's how you can kind of evaluate. We probably have all teachers in our lives, whether they were ourselves. I have a friend who's a high school principal that's going through the same challenge. I have another friend who's a college counselor. So she's helping high schoolers getting into college and they have to write essays. So you can imagine the challenge there. So, and then I have another friend, similar kind of, that teaches high school mathematics and physics kind of thing. So we've had these same discussions that you're probably doing, but the question I have for them is, how can you have them show you that they're creative thinkers or critical thinkers? So that's what you're really doing, is get into things that, a couple folks mentioned that earlier. demonstrate critical thinking, demonstrate creative thinking. So it's not regurgitating knowledge that's in this database, this massive database. It's actually how they connect the dots between those points of knowledge.
That's great. Thanks, Bob. Any other contributions? I've got two small ones. I have I've been doing a lot of ChatGPT for busy professionals. It's kind of an overview of, I've done it for dozens of companies, Harvard Business School and others. And a couple companies have been asking me to do it and have one coming up on Wednesday. This company today sent me an email and said, oh, our IT department is very concerned about teaching our employees about ChatGPT because they think the employees are going to want the paid version. Can you please talk to them about Bard Enterprise AI? And I don't quite know sure what Microsoft's selling it, but it came from the IT person. So, you know, this idea of, you know, fast follower in Microsoft that we've seen in so many marketplaces, definitely happening there. Last I would share, people haven't tried text to video. Runway is a great, easy one to use. It is stunning. At least I found it stunning. Be able to put in 6-10 words. I put in, you know, show me lightning hitting the Grand Canyon at sunset, and boom, up pops 4. You know, I think they're only like 4 or 8 seconds long, but it really gives you a sense for yet another part of this Gen AI world that's like magic. Last call. Any other last contributions or comments, questions?
Okay, I got one.
Go ahead,
So-
Rosemary.
All right, so I think Claude 2 is awesome. It is so much faster. You can upload multiple PDFs that reside on your hard drive. You don't have to have URLs, and you can ask it to do all kinds of things. It's so fast. I love it.
Are you finding that becoming your go-to tool? Or are you still ChatGPT?
No, I am. I'm using a lot ChatGPT, but for these kinds of applications, you get a 15, 20 page PDF. It's just so much easier than going to ChatGPT plugins, make sure the right plugins on and so on.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, great. Well, thanks everyone. Another great conversation. We are getting better at posting these things online on a YouTube channel. And so this should be up in a day or so, and keep getting the word out. It's a lot of learning here. I continue to see myself going up the learning curve. I see the teams go up. I believe every company is going to go up. And I think all of us are going to be in a learning lab in a couple different ways, certainly for the foreseeable future, because the relenting change of innovation is not slowing at all. So thanks, everyone. Have a good evening, and the folks in Australia, have a good day.